Hello and welcome to this edition of Democratically Speaking. I'm your host, Steve Foote, and I'm also the chairman of the Brockton Democratic City Committee. The purpose of our show is to bring the candidates for this year's elections right into your living room so you can meet them, get a feel for what they're all about, and figure out a good way to make an informed decision in the next election, which will be a September primary for the Democratic seat in the 10th Plymouth District. Our guest today is a candidate for that seat. His name is Matt Albanese. Matt, pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Matt, for the folks at home here in Brockton, you're from West Bridgewater Selectman right now. You're just given that position up to devote your time to running for this seat, the state rep seat. Can you give the folks in Brockton who may not be as familiar with you a little background about who is Matt Albanese?
Sure, absolutely. Well, ironically, my roots are in Brockton. My father grew up on West Harvard Street, and my mother grew up on Magoon Avenue. Both met each other in high school, Brockton High class of '67, and I ended up going to Cardinal Spellman High School myself. So most of my family and friends are right here in the city, and I happen to live in West Bridgewater right now. But I think one thing that's really common is a phrase that an elected official used many years ago, and he said, doesn't matter which boat we came to this country in, we're all in the same boat now. And I think that's true in many ways. And that's always kind of inspired me to be involved in public service. I used to work in the state legislature as a legislative aide to former state representative Tom O'Brien, who's now our county treasurer. So public service has always been an interest of mine, but a passion. It's not simply a hobby, it's really a passion and a calling. And I enjoy trying to help people, and that's one of the reasons I'm running in this race.
That's great, Matt. Can you give us a little background about your education,
Sure.
things like that?
Absolutely. I attended Cardinal Spellman High School, went on to Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. That was the year that the basketball team didn't do so well. Of course, the year I was in 8th grade, they were doing great, and right through high school. After that, I ended up going to Suffolk University School of Law. I went nights, and I worked during the day full-time. After that, I went back to Suffolk to get my master's with a concentration in international business. And while I was going to business school at night, I was working in the legislature as the House counsel to the Committee on Medicaid. And that's where I got my interest in elder law. And I've been a private practice attorney for the past 7 years in that field.
Yeah, Medicaid, that'll give you a good background now with the health plan coming through. And of course, now Massachusetts being having the original health plan, that would probably bode well for you if you were to be elected to this position.
Absolutely, and that's such an important aspect, and I'm glad you touched upon it, Steve. I've asked the question many a times, and I don't get a response until I read it somewhere. How much does universal health care really cost us? And we've had it in this Commonwealth for 4 years now, and I'm hearing now Tim Cahill, our state treasurer and candidate for governor, say it's upwards of many hundreds of millions, if not in the billion-dollar range. And I think that's disconcerting, especially to me as a taxpayer and me as a resident of this Commonwealth, because I want to know, is there a savings? I always thought if you insured everyone, it would cut down on those visits to the emergency room. It would allow people to get the preventive care that they need. And I'm not sure that's happening.
Yeah, maybe it's not been properly explained, and that probably be one of the, I'm sure that'll be one of the things that'll be talked about between you and your opponent. You're running against Christine Canavan. Mm-hmm. It'll be, I'm sure that'll be discussed between the two of you.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to an issue that's big here in Brockton now.
Sure. Let me guess.
The power plant.
Plant. Sure.
Yes, the power plant. Now, you've recently signed on to a petition to have a statewide moratorium on power plants. Could you explain that to us and explain, well, why don't you just explain your whole position on the power plant?
I first found out about the proposed power plant, I think it was in a meeting at West Junior High. And no official had called me. The proponents didn't notify me or my community for that matter. And as you know, this affects West Bridgewater almost as much as it affects Brockton. The proposed site is literally, 100, 200 yards from our town line and from our aquifer. So our water supply is at stake. And there were so many different issues between the pollution, water supply, trucking in diesel. We had no choice in West Bridgewater but to get involved. And that was the turning point for me to say, you know what, this is a regional issue. It isn't just let's not do it because it's in our backyard. Let's be consistent here. Either fossil fuel power plants are bad for the Commonwealth or they're not. Let's make a choice. And that was the genesis of getting the task force together that's comprised of several area communities.
So now the unions are going to say that it's going to bring a lot of jobs. What do you tell the union guys when they say that? And how do you justify, I mean, that's a great argument. I mean, the pollution argument, both sides of the pro power plant guys and the anti-power plant guys all have experts that come in and counteract one another.
True.
So it's really up to somebody like yourself or a city councilor in Brockton or any number of elected officials around the area to really have to analyze this material and figure out where they stand on it. So how do you make that juxtaposition?
You know, I didn't have to go far. It was a personal issue for me. My dad at the time was a member of Carpenters Local 624. He had served as their treasurer for many years, and naturally he wasn't too happy. His local supports the power plant, and the men that he works with support it, and I understand that. If you need a job and you don't have a job, that's all that matters. That's your quality of life. We can talk about aesthetics, pollution, long-term hazards. If you're not bringing home a paycheck every week, what's the point? So I understand the concerns as far as job growth, but I would argue there's other areas and other avenues we should be focusing on, especially within the utility industry, solar and wind. Both are good paying jobs. They're emerging industries. They're union paying jobs. That's the focus that I think we need to look at and start bringing some of that down here to this area, especially in Brockton.
Yeah, it's a tough question because you have very vociferous feelings on both sides of the issue, you know, so it is tough. Well, let's talk about one that's a little easier. At least in my mind, it's a little easier. A lot of people in Brockton work and or play at the Raynham Dog Track. And Mr. Carney also has many interests in Brockton, as well as he has sidelines over here on the east side. Carney Trucking helps us with our snow removal. Brockton Fairgrounds.
Sure.
It's a bigger issue than just slots at the track. Personally, I'm for slots at the track. I think slots at the track are a good idea. It'll bring in immediate revenue with no cost to the state, and it creates a lot of jobs. What's your position on slots at the track? And if you were to be elected as a state rep, how would you go about to push that forward?
Sure. Great question. And as you know, the issue of casino gaming has been around for a couple of years. And again, it's not an issue that affects just one community, it affects all of us. And I took the time to get on the casino task force, which meets in Lakeville, and we've studied this issue to the nth degree. And what we found is it isn't so much the host community doing well, which it will, it's the surrounding communities that seem to absorb the costs. And what I mean by that is cost to the schools by increased school population, cost to public safety. You're certainly going to have more fire and police runs and responses from those entities. So, you know, it's been a tough issue. I've put a lot of focus on it, and I'll be honest with you, my board did come out in favor of endorsing slots at Raynham, at the existing facility. I think it's a good fit. The facility's there, the infrastructure is there, there's good highway access. If there is going to be casino gaming in southeastern Mass, it's my preference that it end up there as opposed to somewhere else, whether it's Fall River, Middleborough, or New Bedford.
Yeah, because as a state rep, you'll not only be representing our area, but you'll also have a say in how it goes throughout the whole state. So,
right.
you know, the other part of the equation being the casino part, some people separate them, some people want to run them together. Personally, I think, like I said, the slots at the track can generate instant revenue. Casinos, even if they were to be approved, you're talking about 2-3 years of construction before they're really online and making any money. So, but I'm glad to hear that you're in favor of slots at the track. I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there that are looking for those jobs will be happy to hear that.
Well, and that's why we wanted to endorse that concept early on. I know there was a bill that was voted on in the legislature about a year ago, and unfortunately it didn't pass. It didn't have the full support from the members. But I think when it comes up again, I think you're seeing more momentum and more of a push, you know, to get some sort of industry down here, and that's going to be a big focus of mine going forward as state representative.
Now, in the 10th Plymouth District, we know you have parts of Brockton. What parts of Brockton do you have, and what other towns are involved?
All of the districts are a little convoluted, but as far as Brockton's concerned, it's Ward 6, precincts A, B, C, and D. Ward 5, precincts B, C, and D. Ward 4, precincts B and C. All of West Bridgewater,